On today's show, the Bucks completing their final practices before the preseason opener, which means this is the last podcast before Bucks and Bulls, and everyone's excited about that. What does Giannis look like on the practice court? We've heard from him over the last few days. And Khris Middleton, perhaps the big story, and certainly a little bit of panic as we find out what the program is for Khris Middleton as he gets himself ready. So plenty of injury updates to bring to the table here. And then we might even talk a little bit of Bucks Bulls. Why don't we preview some preseason basketball?
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN. Alongside me, the founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden, for today's show that is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started there. And of course, we thank everyone for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every weekday. And you're going to be very excited by the time Monday's show rolls around, because it will be a post-game show for Bucks and Bulls. We think it's going to be our first look at Giannis and Damian Lillard in the same uniform, which is going to be, well, the first time in a Milwaukee uniform, which I think everyone's going to be excited about. We're going to talk about everything we've seen and heard from practice over the last few days on today's show. But we appreciate the support. If you're new on board and you haven't done so yet, subscribe, hit like, drop comments. There's been plenty of debate on YouTube over the last few days. That's for sure. It's been a fun place to hang out with a lot of Bucks fans and talk through everything that's happened here over the last week. So we appreciate the support and keep getting behind Locked On Bucks and support the show. It's going to be a fun season coming up here. Frank, tell you what else has been fun. Seeing Giannis and Damian Lillard on the practice court together. And it does certainly appear to me that every photo Giannis seems to be putting on social media at the moment has him doing something crazy, and Damian Lillard is in the background there on the same court, on the same floor. And I think everyone's getting excited about that. But perhaps most importantly, and we'll get to Khris Middleton a little bit later on, but for Giannis being on the floor, and it sounds like, he's playing 5-on-5. I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's playing in this game against the Chicago Bulls. But the fact coming off the surgery, you mentioned it last time we podcasted, we just didn't hear a lot about that surgery and the recovery, but it seems like he's in a good shape, and he certainly looks good as per usual at this time of year.
Yeah, and I think the comments he made the other day about feeling some knee pain early last season and pretty much working through it the entire season, and kind of the process he went through to get to the point of agreeing to do the knee procedure, which he's never had any surgery of any kind that we've ever heard of, which is a pretty lucky place to be as a 28-year-old, almost 29-year-old professional athlete, especially one that takes the kind of abuse, and well, he dishes out plenty of physical abuse as well, but just the physicality with which he plays, just sort of speaks to, again, knock on wood, that he continues to be as kind of healthy and resistant to injury as he has been. But yeah, interesting. We don't know what would be like for Giannis coming back from a surgery, but to see him, as much as he was saying, like, it was hard to. I mean, he always said like I didn't do anything for 3.5 months. It's like, okay, well, we know you did stuff, right? I mean, we saw kind of pictures and stuff of him doing, workouts and stuff all summer, but it certainly didn't seem like he was, necessarily doing the types of things he would normally do when healthy. And so, yeah, to see pictures of him, levitating above the rim, dunking around, some of his new and younger teammates, baptizing some of these young guys in their first practices with the team is always good to see. So, it's early, right? We just had media day. So hope springs eternal. So hopefully, the procedure Giannis had puts him in a good spot to be healthy and feeling good all season. Let's just go with that for now. Yeah, good to see him again practicing, and good to see Damian Lillard out there. I think Dame kind of acknowledged he didn't I don't think he came out and said that he was out of shape, but basically more or less said that he, was maybe not where he normally would be, given kind of the uncertainty that he was dealing with over the past, couple months. So, which again, it's like, okay, I guess you wouldn't be scrimmaging with your teammates if you're, not allowed in the building or wherever it was going on in Portland. But good to see them both practicing. And yeah, it's an interesting question. Will we see them on Sunday? I think the fact that this game is at Fiserv, and given that you just had this huge, this huge momentous trade happen, and there's tons of energy and tons of excitement, I would think that they would want to get both of those guys out there for at least a, token appearance to start the game, at least, maybe start the game, start the first quarter, start the third quarter, but keep their minutes pretty low. Giannis has really, we've talked about this, Giannis has really not gotten the preseason in the past few years. He played 2 preseason games last year. He only played in one of the 2 Abu Dhabi games against Atlanta, which, by the way, seems like 8 million years ago that they did that. But in the prior season, he only played 3. So I would, if he plays 15 minutes, like maybe that feels about right. I don't know. But again, also wouldn't shock me if he rested. But I don't know. I feel like with this being a home game, the Bucks would like to get him out there at least a little bit. Give fans a taste of the Dame Giannis combination. But again, like preseason, like us sickos, like we're excited to see like any basketball we get up for summer league games, right? So even if the new big 3 are all out, certainly Khris Middleton's not going to play. Even if Dame and Giannis both rest, we'll find reasons to watch and be into it. But yeah, let's start the Dame Giannis era off right to kind of kick off the preseason. Might as well. I think they get 2 home games at Fiserv to start the preseason. So got to give the fans something to be excited about, I think.
Yeah, there's a weird preseason road trip that's thrown in the middle of this extended preseason as well, because we still do have around 20 days ish until the season opener. So it's an extended preseason there. And last time we spoke about the season start, someone did point out in the YouTube comments, the FIBA World Cup. Maybe that's why they pushed back the season for a little bit there. I didn't actually see that officially, but it would make some sense. Obviously, a lot of these guys have played international basketball. So there's still a little bit of a break before opening night, which then does lead us to our conversation about Khris Middleton. But I do think, look, it almost feels like this Sunday, if these 2 play, again, I'm not expecting them to play big minutes either, but it feels like it'll be a celebratory unveiling of Damian Lillard and Giannis, and at home. It feels like if they don't play, there's going to be a lot of people disappointed, because I'm actually assuming there's going to be a big crowd at Fiserv for this preseason game. I'm not sure what the tickets are looking like there, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Unfortunately for me, this is a 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. on Monday morning, so not the start I needed to the season, but I'll be up. I'll be excited to watch it, and we'll have a post-game podcast for sure. Let's get to Khris Middleton next, because I know that there is some concern around Khris, and he did speak today at practice and gave a little bit of an update of where he's at, because I don't think the updates from Adrian Griffin yesterday really cleared up anything for anyone. So Khris Middleton spoke. We'll get to that next. But first, we'll talk about FanDuel, our sponsor of today's podcast. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. And I was just perusing the website here, Frank, and I do believe the Bucks win total, going back a couple of weeks ago when they were first dropped, I think it was 51.5. It might have been 52.5 there. Now at FanDuel, that's up to 54.5. So there's a little bit more expectation there on the Bucks. That's 55 wins. That's a fair old regular season, depending on how many guys play. But check out the FanDuel website there if you want to get involved. They've got spreads, player props, over and unders, and plenty more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. That's FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. I did mention it already a couple of times, but by the time you listen to this podcast and you get yourself set for early next week, it'll be post-game. Preseason is here, so make sure you join me and Frank. We'll break down Bucks and Bulls and get ourselves warmed up for a long season here on Locked On Bucks. So we appreciate the support. As I said, if you haven't done so yet, subscribe or follow or turn the notifications on, and you'll know as soon as those shows drop right throughout the season. So let's get to Khris Middleton. So we've got a history with the Bucks of perhaps not exactly being in the loop of what's going on with injury stuff. They're normally pretty secretive in terms of return times and recovery plans and those types of things, which I've never really minded. I mean, I understand why they go down that path, even if it is frustrating for the fans. Adrian Griffin did not give much away at all. In fact, he at times seemed like he was trying to act like he didn't know what he was being asked, even though there were very specific questions about Khris Middleton and his knee. But Khris did speak today, and he said that in terms of him not playing 5-on-5 basketball just yet, he did indicate that this was actually the plan right from the start. The plan hasn't deviated. There hasn't been any setbacks along the way. He still thinks that he's in line to play on opening night. But I think the key messaging from Khris Middleton here, and he was pretty clear about it, was that there hasn't been a setback. And while it may be slower than what the fans would like, and they'd say, hey, this surgery was 4 months ago, we want to see Khris Middleton playing 5-on-5 and back out on the court. So then everyone's feeling a little bit more relaxed about the situation. I think it should be taken in a positive light that he said himself he feels great, and he's just needing to be patient at the moment and follow the plan that they've obviously got in line. And the Bucks historically have been pretty cautious, particularly at the start of seasons.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think with Khris, given the kind of history of the past year, first off, him sounding very confident, saying that, the knee feels so much better coming into this camp than it had in quite some time, right? Basically playing all of last year, knowing that he was going to need that cleanup procedure. Obviously, that's a very positive thing. So
we should say, Frank, I don't know if you felt the same way, but the messaging from Khris Middleton last year was not like this. He was just like, I don't know. We'll see how it feels. I don't know how I'm feeling. Hopefully next week I feel better. It is different messaging from Khris, which I think is important.
Yeah, and at media day last year, he had just gotten the cast off his left wrist and literally couldn't grip things with his left wrist.
Yes.
And it was he was hoping that he could come back within the first couple weeks of the season. So, that was basically saying oh, maybe I'll be ready in a month. Instead, it ended up being 2 months, right? Instead of coming back, late October, early November, he doesn't play until that December 2nd game against the Lakers at home, which folks might remember. And then unfortunately, he only plays 2 weeks, has that stinker of a game in that absolute shit show in Memphis that the Bucks got just the absolute doors blown off them. And mid-December, he's back on the shelf, right? And it's not clear, is it, ankle, knee, wrist, question mark, foot problems because he forgot to wear his orthotics. There's all this smoke about something that we don't really fully understand. Mike Budenholzer notably didn't seem that concerned about it, but I believe at the time, I think they were listing him with kind of knee soreness, and ultimately that proved prescient, right? That's ultimately what kind of hurt him most of the year and ultimately required the surgery in the off season. And, really he didn't then come back until I think January 23rd is basically when Khris Middleton's season really started, because it was such a stop start in December. And he really, basically had that really good debut game against the Lakers. And then that was about as good as we saw until the following calendar year. So, the bad news is, this is the knee that he had surgery on is kind of the one he's had, the longest history of issues with, the right knee that he originally hurt in college. So that's the bad news. The good news is, there's no other random injuries, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy to think back. It's well, he was coming off the left knee MCL sprain, right, in the playoffs, which was the thing that we all assumed would be the big issue for him recuperating over the 2022 summer with. But then, oh yeah, by the way, he also needed this wrist surgery because the wrist didn't heal properly. And then that was presumed to be the thing that was keeping him out to start the year, right? It was this wrist issue. And then, the season is, he's kind of slowed down by the right knee issue, which we didn't even know was really even a thing basically until, December of last year. At least we didn't know that it was, an issue that was causing him a lot of problems during the season. So, lots of things that have been going on with Khris. And, I know you and Justin talked about, like, is he injury prone? Like, how do you kind of parse all this stuff? I mean, I think obviously some of these injuries were very random, right? And he's had some random injuries throughout his career, whether it's the hamstring tear on the wet spot. What was that, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever, 7 years ago? I don't even know when it was. Quite some time ago. And, again, just kind of slipping wrong, hurting the left knee. But I think the bigger concern is, like, now it's like, well, that right knee is a chronic knee issue. So hopefully, he's going to be able to play this year. And hopefully, as he was suggesting, he's going to be pain free and in a much better place than he was last year as far as the knee goes. But, we'll see, right? Athletes, you just never know what might crop up. So, anyway, fingers crossed. I will be an optimist and say he's hopefully will be back around opening night. But, the other thing that's different this year is it's like, as good as Drew Holiday is as an overall player, especially in the regular season, and he's been was awesome the last couple of years. With Dame Lillard, it really is like a dynamic duo with Khris as kind of the third wheel. We had always the debate, in previous years about, is it Khris Middleton? Is Khris the second best offensive player? Is Drew the second best offensive player? Now there's really no doubt about that. And so I think, having a second superstar basically, I think gives you more latitude to let Khris take his time a little bit. So if he does have to miss some games early in the season or whatever, or they manage his time, I think you're in a better spot.
It doesn't feel as desperate as it did at times last year, where we were looking at the Bucks team. The offense was struggling. Giannis was having to battle through trying to carry the team on a nightly basis. He was physically battling by that point in time. So I totally agree. You feel, well, certainly I do. I feel a little more relaxed about the situation. You mentioned the idea of management for Khris. So just a quote here from an article on The Athletic, because he was asked whether there's going to be a management plan. And he said, I don't think the plan is to manage it once I'm out there. That could change. He said, hopefully it doesn't. He's just listening to the team at the moment, but he said his body feels great. The knee feels great. So I don't think this is something we should have to manage going down the road. Now, he is 32 and he has had a bunch of injuries over the last few years. So I assume that he's still, even in a perfect scenario, he's probably looking at the 65 game mark where most players are at the moment. But again, the messaging is positive. And also, I know there's going to be a lot of Bucks fans that don't care about what Khris Middleton says. They're still not going to feel good about it. And I totally understand that. But we're just going to have to wait and see with Khris Middleton. But certainly, I feel like that was some positive stuff there from him. And you brought up a bad memory for me. The game where Khris Middleton returned from his hamstring, was that the same game that Jabari Parker then tore his second ACL? What a disastrous time in all our Bucks fans' life it was on that night. From being very excited to highly depressed again in the space of about a quarter and a half, I think it was. I think they were playing Miami at the time. So anyway, hopefully Khris Middleton is healthy and able to move forward. I do want to ask you though, Frank, what should we expect from this preseason? We've spoken about Giannis and Dame a little bit, but if we do look at Bucks and Bulls, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing? Because we expect there's going to be a bunch of guys get opportunities, maybe some different lineups. First look at Adrian Griffin. And I don't think there's any great hot takes that should be taken from the preseason, but nonetheless, we're going to enjoy it. And I think there's a number of players we're looking forward to seeing. So we'll talk about that after Bird Dogs. I don't care what the weather is on Sunday afternoon. Get your Bird Dog shorts on for the preseason opener and get down to Fiserv Forum. Bird Dog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. By the way, I did see it looked like it was pretty warm in Milwaukee a couple of days ago, which seems pretty nice for this time of year. But Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better, and they fit better than just your regular shorts. And those regular, these regular shorts. They're made of a stiff, restricting cotton, which, let's face it, can be pretty uncomfortable. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you can get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter the promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. All right, let's just get to the question on everyone's lips entering the preseason opener. Who's going to start this game? If we assume that Dame, Giannis, and Brook Lopez are playing, who else do you think is going to be in line? Adrian Griffin did speak today about the starting lineup in general and said, hey, all these guys are going to have to earn it. He's not giving it to a veteran automatically, whether that's Pat Connaughton or Jay Crowder, Marjan Beauchamp, Malik Beasley, all these guys in the mix. So whether it's the starting lineup question or just something in general you're looking forward to seeing, clearly Giannis and Dame, but maybe something else, what are you watching for here? Because it is always an interesting time of year with some new players on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many directions that Adrian Griffin could go for that fifth starter spot. I think Malik Beasley would surprise me a bit just because I think his 3-point shooting becomes less useful with the starters now that you have Dame in there. I think if Jrue Holiday was starting, Beasley as a starter would have been, assuming no Grayson Allen still, that Beasley would have made, more sense in that regard because you had sort of the strong defender and you would have valued the kind of floor stretching. But again, could be Beasley, right? It's possible. I think obviously some of the other guys, Marjan Beauchamp, it's sort of one of these things, and I don't know, like too much into the Bucks, seeming exuberance about their young guys that we saw over the course of the summer from John Horst and Adrian Griffin. At the end of the day, it's like Adrian Griffin's got to win basketball games. So it's like how much,
how much patience, I think maybe. That's what Frank was getting to there. He'll come back here in just a second. I can see him. I can see him. He's about to get on first, and he's back. So I think you were talking about the idea of he wants to win. So it's going to be how much patience or leash is he going to have for the young guys?
Yeah, exactly. So I think the Marjan, I could definitely see it happening. And again, a lot of it just comes down to like, is Marjan's defense good enough? And I mean, he made some comments in the paper that, he knows that's his meal ticket. Like that's what he needs to do to play games is he's got to defend at a high level. He struggled getting over screens last year. I think he struggled with some of, the kind of just knowing where he was supposed to be sometimes, switching when he wasn't a switch. And so again, it's like, how much progress has he made and has he matured? So we'll see. I think there's a really good chance on Sunday because they're going to have, both wing spots will be open with Khris not playing. So Marjan plus, Pat Connaughton, right? Pat is kind of like always the obvious fifth starter, just, hiding in plain sight is how I always think of him. Cause he is the guy at this point that, based on his body of work the last few years, I would say is the guy that I would choose to be a closer. So why not start him? We knew Bud liked to bring him off the bench as sort of like a kind of stabilizer, complimentary guy. But, when you think about what he does, competent defender, good rebounder for his position, smart cutter, shoots corner threes above the break threes, extended range, right? Gets threes up. And obviously doesn't really need the ball, right? And last year we also saw, him and Jrue Holiday have really nice pick and roll chemistry, which I don't think we were expecting to see that coming into the year, right? The kind of pick and rolls where Pat would so often just be able to slip into the lane and get layups, which again, you kind of think of Pat as being a guy who's screening to point line. So we'll see kind of what the options are. And then, I mean, Jay Crowder could be in the mix, right? I mean, I tweeted about, seeing him listed at 251 pounds was a bit eye-opening. I figured they would probably want him kind of slimming down given the lack of, wing defenders, and have him being, svelte and ready to go, just from a kind of body perspective. Again, he was listed at 235 previously. Was he actually 235 when he played for the Bucks? Who knows, right? He wasn't in camp and playing with the Suns last year. So so that number could have been made up, but 251, I would say, like, that's not a number that got picked out of thin air. I'd go ahead and say that that's what he weighed in at some point this preseason. And that's a lot of weight for a 6'6" guy. Again, not saying he can't carry that weight, but certainly in the playoffs, he didn't obviously look like a guy who was going to be able to keep up with the best wing types, including Jimmy Butler. And so, yeah, again, I'm sort of of the opinion of he's a small ball 4 until proven otherwise. So we'll see. And if he's just a small ball 4, then obviously I think that limits his upside, his opportunities with this version of the Bucks. If he can, defend on the wing more, then certainly that changes things, because obviously there's more of a need there. So yeah, curious to see it. I'm sure we'll see, Andre Jackson Jr. at least early here in preseason. No idea what we might expect from him. I'm sure he could play with Dame. The lack of shooting, obviously more of a problem with Giannis. But, with Dame, it's like he's, as we've talked about it, he's an offense unto himself. So you can put pretty much anybody out there with him. And, Andre Jackson Jr. can set screens and do weird stuff. And it's probably not going to really hurt the Bucks offensively. So yeah, just kind of curious to see, all these guys, especially the young guys, I think, and the new faces. Just curious to see them in Bucks uniforms for the first time. But obviously Dame is the guy that we're going to have all eyes on, and fun to see Dame and Giannis have their first ability to play with each other. And I think the other thing too, I mean, people talk about Dame and Giannis, but I think Dame and Brook Lopez does it from a pick and roll perspective. Arguably is even more important in terms of getting Dame easy shots, just because Brook's going to be guarded by less mobile players, right? Bigger guys who are going to have a harder time coming out to meet Dame at the level of the screen. And there was a really good article on Bucks.com. Louis Zatzman, I think that's how you pronounce his name, put together a great piece using second spectrum data, talking about how Dame just like torches switches. Like if you think you can just switch stuff, I mean, Dame is just a murderer of switches essentially. And so just thinking about, again, like how you defend Dame, how you defend him in pick and rolls with Giannis or Brook. Hey, if teams want to switch because they don't want to, give up kind of passing angles for rolls and things like that, the good news is for the Bucks is they can attack that too. So yeah, we'll see. And in general, I'm just curious to see also, I mean, defensively, I'm really curious to see kind of like how much their principles are different. I mean, they're presumably going to play obviously a lot of drop and getting over screens, and we'll see how much Dame's doing that in game 1 of the preseason. But I think just interesting just to see. I think the biggest question I have is just like how aggressive are they in terms of trying to force turnovers, gamble, things like that. That wouldn't surprise me, even if a lot of the basic principles of playing a deep drop with Brook in 1-5 pick and rolls, even if they keep doing that. I am curious if they do some more blitzing with other guys, if they try to use those wings to put more pressure on the ball. Certainly there's been some talk of that, but I think tactically we really haven't heard a whole lot about what this team may do differently on defense.
You mentioned that article talking about how Dame can just destroy defenses. He also had a quote that if you're a Bucks fan, you were just absolutely salivating listening to him speak the other day when he said, look, teams will have the choice. They either want to clog up the paint, but if they do that, then I can just go out and hit 9 threes. I was like, 9 threes? That sounds pretty damn nice. The Bucks have not had shooters capable of doing that, but we've seen Dame do that to a lot of teams, which was pretty exciting. A couple of other guys, AJ Green, where does he fit now with the changes that have been made on the roster and the addition of Malik Beasley, and then Campaign as well, who was officially announced a few days ago. And, we suspect he's going to play a little bit. Maybe he's one of the guys that does play decent minutes in the preseason. So there's plenty to look forward to. We will have a post-game podcast after the preseason opener there as well, which we're looking forward to doing. We can talk about all the ideas and what the Bucks might try and do, but getting to watch the team on the court is going to be a lot of fun. So we'll be back early next week on Monday Look out for the show. Turn the notifications on and you'll know as soon as we upload that show wherever you listen to Locked On Bucks. We appreciate the support. Enjoy the weekend and enjoy the game, particularly if you're going to Fiserv Forum, and we'll speak to you after.